Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Your Life Unfiltered podcast. In this podcast, we dig deep into the life experiences of our guests to connect the dots between their upbringing and what they're doing today. Today, we have special guest Parth Savla. Parth, if you want to quickly introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Parth Savla from Union City, California, and I'm a caretaker of a dog named Buddy. He's an adorable 8-year-old Chiweenie. And my biggest, I would say, MO in life is really bringing out the best in people, and supporting them and bringing out the same for the people that they love. I'm just really grateful to be here. Awesome initiative, Keto and Dipom, and yeah, again, just super grateful to be here. Thank you.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. So one thing we wanted to hear from you is a little bit about, your childhood, your upbringing, in order to connect the dots between, how you were raised and the environment you were raised and how that's translated to what you're doing today. Do you want to share a little bit about your story? Like what was it like growing up and, the experiences you had?
Sure. Let's see. I was born and I hope to give you the 2 to 3 minute version as we keep on going, but I think it's interesting to note. So I was born in India and I grew up primarily in New Jersey. So I came to New Jersey when I was about 4 years old. I bounced around, first living in the Jersey City area, which many of you may know about, until I was about 10. And then entirely different environment in a place called Mountainside, New Jersey, which is a lovely suburban town along Route 22 in New Jersey. So, get that you might be familiar with that area. And that really shaped kind of how I evolved as a person, I think. Um, and also in that world, I was like one of very few Indian families growing up as well. So I felt different, but I felt also really welcomed. Um, yeah, and I'm happy to share more about my home upbringing and school and things like that as well.
Yeah,
Got it.
sure. So I know you actually grew up in New Jersey in a very different time because now it's like Brown Central across most of
Yeah.
New Jersey. But I mean, I was also born and raised in New Jersey, so I know exactly what you're talking about. If you look at, late 80s, 90s, etc., that time frame, um, it was a completely different time than how it is today. There was, much fewer grocery stores, in specific Indian grocery stores. There was much fewer Indian restaurants. It was like the diversity was much lower than it is today. So what I'm really interested to learn more about is, what was your experience with that? Because, for you came at a young age, but you came from an immigrant family. So going into a completely different environment that was predominantly, white and being a person of color, it must have been a very different experience for you. Right. So like, would you like to share a little bit about that?
Thank you. That's a great notice. I appreciate you pay. Yeah, that's a great notice. There are two worlds I felt like I kind of lived in. One was the upbringing in mountainside New Jersey, very kind of old 50s, 60s types of homes, and again, one of few families. And it was a kind of city or town where like the librarian knew your name. Like it was like that kind of a town. And then juxtap or contrast that to this other experience that I had where every Sunday my parents would take me to this Sunday school called Vivekananda Vidyapit to learn about Indian philosophy and culture and Sanskrit and different prayers and different mantras and all these kinds of things, um, and bhajans and dhuns and learn some instruments along the way. Um, there was that life, and then there was this life. So it was a very interesting navigation between both lives. So I felt like kind of for a long time, as maybe many of us might resonate with. It was like straddling two different horses as I was trying to understand what my identity was. Um,
hmm
but but overall, it was really positive. Um, and yeah, it was very positive. A quick aside is growing up, my parents we had tons and tons of books in our home, so they really encouraged curiosity, exploration, um, and so in high school, I was very active. So I did like student council and ran track and did junior ROTC. And so yeah, it was like on this one hand being really really active in a lot of those kind of uh, clubs and activities.
hmm
That's how high school was for me.
Got it. Got it. So, after you graduated from school, what was your kind of thought process in deciding what to do next, right? So, coming from an immigrant family, I think there's always pressure to do, engineering or medical, all those. But you did something else altogether, anthropology and religious studies. So, how did first of all, decide or convince your parents, and what was your motivation behind it?
Thanks. Well, once there was really not much convincing. I think my parents were like, "What is what is anthropology?" Kind of growing up in a Gujarati family, like, "Amati paisa ke te banavsu to." Like, how are you gonna make money from this? But I feel really blessed growing up,
Mhm,
and like my parents were always supported kind of my curiosity. So, my dad was kind of like, whatever it is that you learn, make sure that you're able to utilize what you're learning and be clear about what. And I was like, okay, now
mhm,
that kind of makes it's a pretty universal application of things. Um, and then secondly was religious studies. So,
mhm.
you would ask me like kind of like what was I hoping to do with that?
Yeah,
As I going into undergrad, I had what I was going to be doing with that because it was so different. We'd actually go party at Rutgers because our school had nothing really on. And so, um, but what it really, really teach me was how to look at the macro and in how that informs the micro. So
mhm,
anthropology is the understanding of how like ideas and notions of God has been made through the eyes of man or human beings. Like there's a constant projection reality onto quote unquote divinity. And so anthropology is this very fascinating study of how does that meaning making thing happen? And the fact that you're able to be the one who's meaning making and have like studied all these myths through civilizations and often how there's all these common threads like oh like things happen in cycles. And so that was like a really big aha moment throughout that time. And then also just to share one more anecdote, like in college, one there was this one class. Can I share a story, or do we need to move
of
on? I want
course.
to leave it
No,
at
No,
no,
go
you
for
go
it.
for it.
Go for it.
Go for it.
okay. So we were reading in this one like religious studies class the autobiography of Gandhi, right? So Mahatma Gandhi, right, wrote this a biography and all these different books written about him. But there was this one book he wrote about his experiments with truth, and it really turned me on to the importance of like conducting personal experiments, like for whatever that personal crafting of that experiment is for your own learning, right? To work through something. So I thought, and this is probably me, a junior in undergrad, I thought this fall semester, let me spend a week living on the streets of New York. So this is right. I was probably, I think I had a cell phone at the time, but I didn't use it. Cell phones had just come out, and they were just kind of getting rid of those toll phones. You had a calling card, and you had to punch in the calling card number, right, to be able to call. So I thought to myself, all right, like let me take a week and put on some camouflage pants, right? Have a calling card, have a journal, $10, and let's see what life is like being like someone who lives on the streets of New York at that time. Um, and I mean, long story short, and there's probably even a longer story about this, but I met some incredible people and learned a lot about myself and about others, as well as like people in general. So these are some like cool little defining moments, I would say, kind of growing up
That
that I
sounds
wanted to share.
amazing, actually, because if I take a step back, right, you studied, well, first off, you went to Sunday school, right? So you got exposure to spirituality and religious studies at a young age. But then when you went into the study of anthropology, the observation that I'm getting out of that is that anthropology in general creates that framework to use logic, reason, and superior observation skills to understand the world. Like that's the parallel that I'm making. And it's interesting because I mean, I know you individually, right? So if I think about the way that you think through things, I think a lot of that may have influenced the way that you approach your diagnosis of the world. Would you agree with that, or like am I way off?
Absolutely. No, I think you're definitely spot on. Really great way to capture that. Yeah, and it elicits a deep curiosity for how to arrive with another and like with myself in the moment of the now and the new now, right? Because yeah, so absolutely.
Yeah, no,
Amazing.
that makes perfect sense because like I also remember you mentioned with anthropology that a part of it is understanding patterns, right? And in order to understand patterns, that means you need to have the ability to make patterns, right? Because you can only understand their patterns happening if you are able to see the parallels between previous trends. And so that's what I was thinking. It's like I think a lot of that may have actually permeated back to the way that you think today.
Absolutely.
Okay, so great background part, and Ketul, thanks for substantiating with your own understanding. It's absolutely incredible. So I think cut to today, right? So you've had all these experiences, and obviously through the after graduating from your undergrad, and you had number of years of experience. You kind of did multiple roles in the industry, like professionally, but also in personal capacity. You're involved in societies, such as JNA and YGP and so on. But now you're focusing more on a thing called NLP. So do you want to talk a little bit more about what NLP is, and how is this useful for people, and what do people need? Why do people need this going forward?
Sure,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. I'd love to share that. Before I share kind of that part, let me share with you a little bit about the lead up to this part,
Okay.
just to give you some context as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's the learning of the instrument, but then there's the learning of like uh, who's the what the worksman person, who's the engineer that's using the tool,
I
to use
see.
that as an
Mm-hmm.
analogy, right? So NLP
Mm-hmm.
as a tool. But I would say prior to this, rewind like 15 years ago, is where a lot of my interest and desire for personal growth and personal development stemmed from. So at that point, I had done a number of courses with an organization called Landmark Education. Some of you may have heard of it, or some of the listeners it as well. Secondly, if you've ever heard of like 10-day Vipassana courses, 10-day silent
Mm-hmm.
meditation retreats. So up until that point too, I had done a number of them. And if you've ever done a 10-day, like you really begin to realize like much emotional charge that is pent up in the body. And so how do we release this charge? Because if the charges aren't released, then it can lead to addiction. It can lead to all sorts of different kinds of diseases, right? So with the I was doing with Landmark, and it was like a volunteer coach type of situation. I had just courses over the span of probably 4 or 5 years, because I loved coaching others and being coached by others and learning different skill sets. Um, But then one of the things that I noticed that was not necessarily discussed in the space of like, so I grew up in an environment where producing results was kind of the preferred quality within a society or within even a family or what have you. Like, how much did you make? What did you do? What did you produce? Where did you, all those kinds of things. But feelings was with went somewhere because clients would come to me saying, I feel depressed, I feel anxious, I feel like suicidal tendencies. So I'm like, okay, well, these thoughts that you're having must have been an accumulation of emotions at some point that you must have been feeling and never had a chance to outlet. And now we're here, right? And this is kind of like how I made these connections. And so I covered NLP, which is it's short for neuro linguistic programming, unique way that you utilize language to loosen the of different habituated patterns, which we might call trauma, right? But that's kind of the really more now commonly used term, but we could call it internalized experience. And if you can basically like utilize the understanding of the physiology of which means sound, which means a kind of sensing capacity, then you can unlock a lot of different things. And I thought, oh wow, like when I came across NLP and I did the certification program, it's like, wow, here's actually a body of work that's been around in the 60s that speaks to this stuff. And so anyway, I began to then incorporate and utilize that in a lot of the way that coach or work with people.
How does NLP work? And maybe you can take a real life example of a situation of a certain context, and maybe if you can walk us through that, that would really help understand this in more detail.
Sure, absolutely. Also, I've got a cheeky, so Geto knows this about me. I like to come up with little cheeky sayings, right? So I've got an acronym for mantra. You know, we think about
Mm-hmm.
mantra, right? We've heard all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
Affirmation for mantra. It's a meditative affirmation that
Mm-hmm.
naturally tunes your radical ability. That's a mantra. So it's a meditative affirmation that naturally tunes your radical, which means returning to essence, your root ability. Right? So when we say Om, Aim, Rim, Shim, all these things, it
Mm-hmm.
connects us to these different energy centers. Anyway, so I wanted to share that little cheeky. But to share with you an example of how an understanding of NLP would work is, and I
Mm-hmm.
shared this with Geto before in one of our previous calls, but let's say, so let's take a step back. Want to paint up for you is IPO. So intention plus physiology equals outcome. But what kind of physiology? Matched physiology. So I always ask, would you ever pet a barking dog? No, you wouldn't pet a barking dog because it's barking at you. Would you pet a smiling dog? Yeah, you would, because the intentional that physiology is a match for the intention, which is connection, right? So let's just use that as a framework. So in this example, let's say you're single, I'm single. Let's say you're the exact kind of girl that I would look for, and I'm the exact kind of guy that you would look for. And here we are at some social event, right? And I see you and you see me, and there's like a little electrical charge. There's a noticing, right? Like, oh, this guy, right? Oh, this girl, right? Like, wow, and there's like a connection, right? So I'm going to paint you two scenarios. So let's say in this first scenario, there's a connection, but I now I'm the guy in the scenario, right? So I don't really say anything. I kind of notice you, you notice me. You kind of, at some point to you, if I haven't said anything and I keep looking at you, you're going to be like, who's this weirdo? Right? Because I'm giving off those kinds of vibes. I think I'll get back on. Yeah, those kinds of vibes. Now, let's say I'm still orchestrating how to create a connection, right? And 30 minutes happen, 45 minutes, nothing happens, and the evening goes on. Now, in the second scenario, let's say, again, the same thing occurs. I see you, you see me, there's like a electrical acknowledgement, and I take a breath myself, and so here's as you asked, like, what's a practical way? So here's a sentence tree that I often suggest to the clients is, if I took a breath, I claim my desire, which is attention, just to create a connection. Beyond that, whatever will happen, right? And then secondly, probably to elicit some level of curiosity from you about me as to further the connection, right? Let's just very simple. So let's say in that moment, I take a deep breath and I walk over to you and I say, hi, my name is so and so. I couldn't help but notice you from across the room. I really want to make a connection, and I'm really nervous. It's not something I normally do, and just wanted to see if you're open to it as well. What's your name? Now, in that scenario, now she's either or he's either going to say yes or no, right? But they'll be able to say yes or no based on the level of energy you're putting out there. Now, if she says yes or he says yes, you're golden, right? Now, whatever you build on top of that acknowledgement of that shared and that connection will be a whole different level, right? And so, anyway, that's one way of breaking it down. Is your IPL, your intention plus matched physiology, will get you closer to your outcome being fulfilled.
Interesting. Really interesting. Okay.
Does that help? I hope that breaks that down.
It does.
It
It does,
does.
definitely.
Yeah, it does. So it's like, I mean, said in different words, it's like combining intent with aligned action. Is that like a similar concept?
Similar. So here's the thing. So actually, when you look at the action, that's on the O part of the formula. Or if you look at
Ah,
the
okay.
intent is in the I, but the physiology, which is the energy, right? So, that's where the key thing is. So when we can actually like kind of master the states of our energy. Can I share with you another example?
Sure.
So let's say you have a big event coming up, whether it is a meeting with your boss, whether it is the negotiation of a raise, whether it is um, meeting someone that you are having an encounter for the first time, or whether it is whatever it is, right? That is a high stakes, not just like a casual meeting with friends, but a high stakes scenario. So, two scenarios. One, you normally do what you normally do, right? Maybe you prepare, maybe you kind of take some deep breaths, and maybe you look at yourself in the mirror and like, okay, I'm good to go, and you walk into the situation. Scenario two is, so your outcome in that scenario, let's say it is and I've done this a lot actually when I used to like apply for a lot of full-time positions just to get in the practice of having employers say yes to me, and no, it's not the job for me. But there was a moment where I would say, I just want to get into the space of interviewing. So when I interview for that one position that I really want, it's like locked down, right? But I need to build my own self. This is at one point in my life, self-confidence, and I'm doing it again with clients, but building my self-confidence to practice, right, was I would call up a friend 10 minutes before, 15 minutes before, and I would call them. We would have this a term called our each other's committed listeners. And I'd say, hey homie, like, tell me 3 things that I'm like amazing at. You got 10 minutes, go. And he would say, "Oh man, like you were this and you were that, and like I love the way you ran that podcast, Deepo. I love that question you asked. That was freaking brilliant. It really pulled it out of like all the people." And I, by the way, watched all your other podcasts too. Great job, And I'm like, "This is who you are. This is who you are. This is who you are." Right. So now with that energy, you go into that high stakes scenario, you're pretty much like 75% a win. Because kind of you've in your mind thought the outcome is I want to get that. Tension is mutual success. Physiology is trust and confidence. I need to be, what energy can I create that will elicit trust and confidence? Well, it's when I'm relaxed, when I'm when I'm feeling good about myself, right? So then now you can then orchestrate and design what support system you might need. Could look like a 10-minute phone call, could look like needing a text, whatever it is you get to orchestrate that gets you into that state and then gets you closer to the outcome. Does that help flesh it out a little bit more?
It absolutely does. Wow. Yeah. It's almost like I feel like based on what you're describing, NLP is a great way to have a systemic, repeatable approach to get the same thing that some people just do innately or intuitively, right? So it's like some people, there's optimistic people, and they're able to do like the stuff you're saying naturally, right? It comes easy to them. But for people that don't, that it doesn't come easy for, this seems like it's a great approach and great way to be able to replicate that through, something that's repeatable and systemic, or systematic rather, which,
Absolutely. And if you've already solved your own level of the Rubik's Cube, then working with someone, you can solve bigger Rubik's Cubes and do
yeah,
it for others because you're going to lead a team. If you can solve that Rubik's Cube, I mean, you're golden. So.
yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, the other part that I find fascinating is that like some people intuitively they're good at doing this type of stuff for certain areas of their life, right? But then they may not be applying the same type of energy to other areas of their life. And so having a framework to be able to replicate success that comes naturally in one area to other areas of your life sounds like it's a very powerful method. So I can definitely see how much value and how powerful the NLP techniques could be.
In fact, I think, Geto, you just hit upon a really huge golden truth. That one of the, and why it is I'm also certified in yin yoga training. So yin yoga certified yoga trainer. And one of the, um, during our teacher training, one of the things, floor exercises and things, is if you want to increase, like if you look at both sides of like your shoulders or what have you, if you want to increase the range of the one that's tight, you don't start with it first. You start with the one that you're actually relaxed at. You actually start with the one you're actually relaxed at, and you enjoy the
Mm-hmm.
relaxation, and then you go into the one that's really tense, and you'll find that you almost have like a 30% plus increase in the one that's tight because you started with the one you were good at.
That is
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. Actually, that does remind me of something that I learned many years ago, but let's put it into the realm of fitness, right? So what people say is that if you want to increase the strength of your upper body, people say you should actually start with your legs. Work out your lower body first, right? And the reason why is because for a lot of those compound exercises, a lot of the strength, even when it comes to lifting with your arms, comes from your legs. It comes from, your
Mm-hmm.
center. And so it's fascinating because if I think about it, I think you described it perfectly. It's like a golden rule that applies not just to some areas of life, but applies to everything. It's like if you want to strengthen your strengths even further, you got to start with your weaknesses because you can take some of the benefits from working on your weaknesses to improve your strengths, and vice versa as well. If you want to improve your weaknesses, start with your strengths, refine them even further, and that some of the benefit there will cascade over to your weaknesses. So, wow, I'm actually making parallels as you're speaking. So,
That's the irony of the situation because that's your strength, and you're trying to figure out what you can connect to. So basically, you're applying the same framework to the situation itself.
Yeah, and actually, when you're in the feel good state of the experience of your strength, like maybe not necessarily the having to figure out the lesson, because that mean you may not be there yet where a lesson is making itself apparent. But when you're
Mm-hmm.
in that feel good state of that relaxation, because you're focusing on your strengths, the rest starts to kind of fall into place. But yeah, yeah, brilliant.
That's awesome. It's amazing. Okay. Ketan, do you have any other questions on this particular topic? Otherwise, I want to switch gears to something else.
yeah, I had one question. So, for the listeners here that may not be aware, Parth is actually also does consulting for marketing. So, I guess one question I had for you, Parth, is have you found ways to combine elements of yin yang yoga, NLP, etc., to any kind of marketing consultations you've done for clients? Or do you treat them as like
Um,
separate domains?
well, what I do is I infuse it into my coaching. So I've got kind of two or three main things. So the first thing is the one-on-one offerings that I have with individuals that we work together, and then I'll be rolling out kind of a 5-day challenge and then group programs. So my whole kind of MO really is to build a community of people who I like to call kind of, I mean, cheeky terms, we all have cheeky terms, but I like to call them visionaries, and more so empathic visionaries, like those who can feel the suffering of others. But then there's also this aspect of like, so as you share about how do I weave these things in, one of the things that I'm skilled in is called parts therapy, PARTS, and where we identify different aspects of our shadow that might be at play. And it's interesting because I work with many folks in the nonprofit sector. I used to consult, and there's a shadow part we call giveaway Gary or giveaway Gertrude, where you sell yourself short. You give everything and everything and everything, and then there's like not much left for you. And then there's like this kind of anger, when I actually talk to certain clients or certain founders of nonprofits, they're like, "How come?" We haven't made the money yet and all this other thing. I'm like, what are you giving everything away? Right. And so But then that ties into your sense of self. That ties into your sense of how you're taking time for self-care, right? So I kind of weave in like yin, yang, and these kinds of understandings inside of that. Um, and then in a marketing sense, as you were mentioning, it's been a little bit now since I've had like a marketing client, but my approach to it is who's your audience, and like user-based design, and what are the sensitivities and sensibilities of your target audience, who you want to serve, and then like reverse engineering that. Yeah, so that's how kind of I fuse it too.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so it sounds like you've been combining multiple approaches together in like a cohesive manner to help people holistically, right? So because like you're looking at it from a marketing perspective, the yin yang perspective, NLP perspective, and probably many other perspectives. So that's great. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So I want to switch gears a little bit, Parth. So uh, I don't know how many people know, but Parth, you are also uh, entrepreneur and have been a full-time entrepreneur before. When you moved to India for a couple of years, you tried starting a company. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that particular experience? Like, what was the company about? How did you get the idea? What was your motivation behind it? And right now as well, I remember that one of the products you brought that you like, I believe it was like home for pigeons or like birds or something like the bird houses, with a very innovative idea. So you want to talk about that plus this? I think that'll be great.
Okay, awesome. Which would you like me to begin with?
Let's start with the one that you did in India, and then we can move to this one.
Cool. India's a juicy story. That was probably like, and I feel now looking back, like, there's this beautiful talk by Steve Jobs about like when you look back, you start connecting the dots. And you start looking back and you go, oh wow, those are the lessons. And who was that guy? I love that guy who did that, right? It was like one of those chapters in my life. So I used to start off, I worked in Manhattan for a little bit of time, working for Rico Lanier, and I hated it. I always had kind of this sense to do my own thing. And kind of Indians, we're entrepreneurial. I thought, what side hustle can I create? Like what could I do? So I thought, all right, let me build websites. Okay, let me teach myself HTML, and this new thing that came on the market was a blogging platform called WordPress. And so I started to like learn about WordPress coding and things. And they say you put in about a month of learning coding and or whatever it is you want to learn on the side, you'll have some level of competency. So I thought, okay, now I can make websites. So I started to make a bunch of websites at like $200, $300. I mean, you got to start somewhere, right? And so you just kind of, I just needed to get the volume in and the practice. That started to go to 20 websites, 30 websites. And then I thought, well, um, I always wanted to go to India and like create some kind of a sense of back office. My parents were based in Mumbai, Gandhivali, and I always wanted to like just read all these stories of entrepreneurs who have offices in India or they went back home and they tried something, and at that point the only stories I heard were the successful ones. I never heard of the ones who failed, right? Because they were just kind of like, I did something else. So of course, all right, there's at least a 50% chance of success. So before I went, and this is a key thing, which is a huge lesson too, is I began to set up my community before I went to India. So like, where was I going to stay? What kind of networking? What kind of individuals that I wanted to connect with? And I did that. And so with Landmark Education, I was again mentioning I was very active with them. They have a global community. So I participated in a Landmark course for entrepreneurs in Mumbai because I thought I'm going to meet with people at that level who are interested in these things and they're operating at, like, they can help me move real fast. And second is I joined an organization called BN, Business Networking International. I don't know if either of you have heard of it, but it is fantastic. So it's global. You can go to bni.com and join a local chapter, similar to Toastmasters. And the premise of it was is only one person in your particular category can hold a seat as a member of that chapter. So if Keto is the real estate maven, then only he or can hold the real estate maven seat in the circle. No other real estate person can join the circle. If Deepam is the podcast king, then only Deepam can hold expertise on teaching other people how to create podcasts, right? And so it was a great community where you give and gain business with each other, and so things happen fast. So before I went out there, I started to put all these things in place. And probably in about 7 months, I had an office in Ragulila Mall. We had in Kandivali West. We had two designers, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is actually happening!" It felt amazing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then probably about a year and a half later, demonetization happened. So up
Oh.
until that point, I had like there's also a clothier shop called Ajay Arvind by Khatri, who is like a
Mm-hmm.
clothier shop that also does a lot of the clothier fashion outfits for Bollywood and all kind of the more of the epic timepiece period type Bollywood movies. And so they were one of my clients. So anyway, I had all these different kinds of clients, but they couldn't pay me. So they were like, because they made mostly a lot of their money in things like oil. So, clothing shops, this is like second, third generation wealth that is like, love you, I'm on the same page with you, but money's dry. It's going to take several months. So then at that point, I had to really make a call. Do I continue to bleed through my savings or do I come back to the US? So then, yeah, I came back to the States. But
Wow.
that's a long story there, but I learned so much. In the midst of
Oh
that
my
too,
God. Mm-hmm.
I I also got asked to do because my heart is in nonprofit work, right? And so one of the in Mumbai, so one of the founders of this DDKF, like this Jane Gachi Oswal organization, came to me and said, "Hey, we want to figure out how to raise money for this new school that we want to build. And can you help us write a report?" So I was like, "Great." And so for a month, I spent a month in Mandvi, just
Oh wow.
interviewing people and taking a lot of really great footage and like preparing a whole report that then became useful. And now they have a school and things like that. So yeah,
That's
that was a
awesome.
fun little side project while I was in India as well, doing
Yeah.
these other things.
Yeah. No, I remember demonetization vividly because I actually was in Pune and Mumbai at that time when demonetization happened. And you know, it's a funny story. It's the first day that the banks have opened after the prime minister has announced demonetization, and the bank is starting to issue the new notes to people, right? So they will issue like 2,000 rupee notes, and so me and my friend we went to Alibag afterwards. After like spending hours in line just exchanging that money. When we came to Alibag, nobody was accepting those notes. Nobody had seen those before. So they're like, everybody is skeptical, and that lasted for about a few days, and then just from then on, it was like it was a brutal experience, and it took a huge toll on people who were like daily wage earners because they couldn't get like cash from anywhere. So I totally remember that entire chapter, and it was not a good one for many people.
Yep.
So unfortunate that happened to you. But so since you've come back, you've also been doing a little bit of your side projects. So tell us a little bit more about the latest one that you're working on,
So
entrepreneurship
now
wise.
entrepreneurship wise,
Mm-hmm.
well, it's actually going all into my business. Not to keep plugging that the whole time here, but like that has been the main thing.
So
But last
actually,
year, go
Parth,
ahead.
I just want to give you a chance to plug your social media platforms and your website. So for anyone that is interested in taking on Parth's courses or reaching out to him to take advantage of his coaching, Parth can share all of his social media profiles here for you guys.
Awesome. I mean, just verbally here, it is coherence coaching dot space. And there's actually a cool story around why I purchased the .space domain name, which kind of speaks to the, again, fundamental philosophy of one, I think everything happens within an ecology. Nothing happens in a vacuum. And so when you can, like the quickest way to cook something is to put it in an
Mm-hmm.
of the context that it's inside of. And so when you can have a really great context and change the environment into like really great or environments that are chosen that support you and where you want to go, progress is right around the corner. So anyway, that's where the .space URL came from. But coherence coaching .space, and then I'll share the Instagram as well. Coherence coaching. Thank you.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Right,
Yes. So
you want
we're
to continue with your story there?
Where was I?
business,
Business.
the
Oh,
latest one.
the last thing is well, two things. One, I think coming off of India, now if I were to create a business in India again with fellow friends who wanted to do something really big, like now I'm ready to do it. Not that I wasn't before, but like it's wild because again, that Steve Jobs talk, of when you look back and connect the dots. And I think it speaks to the intelligence behind your podcast here as well, because by creating this, you get to meet amazing people, and you get to meet them at a certain level of dialogue and a certain frequency of conversation that is different from another space, and so that then becomes part of your social capital. And now I think if I were to go back and create something, it would be, yeah, I'd know how to do it. Like I'd know how to do it um, in a number of different ways with other people. Let's see. In terms of anything entrepreneurial right now, yeah, I think I've really just no, actually, just really the business, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So I've launched this program called the Visionary Club, where it's being for 12-week program. It's a 12-week program where we engage in. So with NLP, I was also trained in hypnosis, future timeline therapy, and past timeline therapy. And this is, again, blow your minds. It's like you can actually bring a person into a state of hypnosis or relaxation with certain prompts and cues around trauma that they may have. And they actually tell you, did this happen during birth, before birth, or after birth? Like
Wait,
it's pretty
wait, what?
wild.
Wait, I didn't get that. Wait, you're saying that the person that you're running the hypnosis on can tell you exactly when that trauma happened? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. They will start
Wow,
sharing.
that's fascinating. Okay.
And they'll start sharing. And so we actually videotape, not videotape, sorry, we audio record these conversations because you're now, as a being that's having this experience, you're now in a limbic state of experience, theta level, and so all these things are coming out. And when you come out of that, you don't remember, like, what did I say? Because the content will escape you since you're in that space. So yeah, like I know the way that I've created this 8 weeks and 8 sessions with folks, like it rewires things, and then within a certain period of time, that again 8 to 12 weeks with support, it just opens things up. So anyway, to be part of the Visionary Club, what's available, and then also goal and that. Um, then I also okay, I'll share with you a really funny entrepreneurship plan that I made. So I'm, I don't have much practice being an investor or investing in things at high levels. I'm learning that. I'm taking a number of financial literacy classes right now and getting my Series 7 and all these other things. But so in India, when I was playing at that certain level, my last uh, company, that was occurring. But now I'm starting kind of from a different game mindset, right? Or a different position. And so it's interesting. I am about to launch this investment program in my company for as little as $20, where people can get a quarter on every dollar that they crop. It's like $20 turns into $90. No, that's not. What is the whole point here? Right? And I already have the collateral, meaning I already have the $92. So if people were to $20 in your crazy idea, give me $92 3 months. I'm like, great, I already have the $92. But what it allows me at this level in my business development program now process, doing this for myself because I've done it for so many other organizations, whether as an employee or whether as a consultant. But now building up that for myself, I go, well, that's awesome. I'll give you 92. But at least now we are connected at that level of conversation, right? Because most people will kind of go, whatever. Let's see. Let's wait till you're a millionaire. And it's like, that's great. That's going to happen at some point, maybe not. But by creating this type of offer, right, for folks, it makes them think.
Okay. I didn't fully follow that story there, but it almost sounds like you're building investor confidence by making it a nominal amount and then promising a guaranteed return after a certain period of time because you already have the collateral to support it. But if I'm understanding what you're saying, it's you're building that confidence through a nominal amount, and then that translates to further business down the road. Is that what you're basically saying?
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Exactly.
Got it. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. So I feel like that's got to be a technique you're using, right? Is it NLP or the multiple other? I feel like there's something like with that approach that's lined with science. I can feel that's what you're gonna say. So it's lined with some technique somewhere.
Thanks. I mean, it's aligned with just well, maybe it's like speaking the future in the present tense now. It's also aligned with
Yeah.
like there's a whole network for fellow coaches, and they also get a certain profit. Kind of like imagine a profit sharing for food, but coaching and empowerment services, in some other kind of way. So anyway,
So part the next section or segment of our discussion is rapid fire. As the name suggests, first thing comes to mind. Let me know when you're ready, and we'll jump right into it.
all right, awesome. Go for it.
All right. First one: tea or coffee?
Coffee,
Okay. Mountains or beaches?
beaches.
All right. Morning person or night owl?
Definitely a night owl for sure. I don't know how morning people do it.
Okay. Interesting. What's your favorite comfort food?
I'm from Jersey, so I'd say pizza and popcorn.
There we go. I like that
To be
answer.
honest, two peas.
Perfect. Okay. What's your favorite virtue in others?
I'd say definitely authenticity. I'd say authenticity coupled with kindness.
Okay.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I think it tells a lot when a person is just being themselves.
That's amazing. I love that. What's your biggest pet peeve?
Let's see. I don't really have a pet peeve. Um, but I would say that one thing that I do find irritating is if people don't ask enough questions or clarifying questions, like before projecting their own reality on people and situations. So I'd say that's
Okay.
an irritant.
That's an interesting one. Wow. So basically, people are not curious enough, or they're not like willing to put the effort into understanding a certain situation and
Correct.
then jumping. Got it. Okay. What's your secret superpower? I guess we know the answer to that. I'd get to-
I have a real superpower. Forget secret superpower. The hypnosis, right? That's a
Wow. Yeah,
superpower.
that's a real superpower.
That's
I
a real
agree.
superpower.
That's a good
Yeah,
one.
that is a good one. I'd say part of hypnosis, or along with that, is just permission. Creating a space of permission for people to be themselves, however way they are.
Okay, that's a good one. I like that.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. What's a superpower you wish you had?
It's a good one. Um, I wish I had the superpower to, like, when people need something or they're missing a resource, I could just snap my fingers and be like, connect with this person. YouTube. YouTube. Buzz,
So
buzz,
basically,
yeah, like
basically Ketul in a nutshell, because
What?
that's what he does.
I mean, I appreciate the
That's
kind words,
adorable.
but like, I do that sometimes. I don't have a resource for everything.
No. I
Exactly,
mean, the
exactly.
kind of things that are, at least like I've come across, like 95% of the things that Ketul always has an answer to it, or he knows someone who knows someone. So basically, you get to it through that.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you, but I guess I don't think as much about myself that way. I think I know some people, but there's plenty of things I don't know. I don't have a resource for, but I appreciate the kind words.
Okay. All right. So for it's not a rapid fire, but what's been your biggest accomplishment in the last 1 or 2 years?
Biggest accomplishment in the last 1 or 2 years. Um, Last year was a huge accomplishment. Was because this year I would say again, I will not mention again, in terms of like coherence coaching and stuff, but I'd say the biggest accomplishment the last 2 years was I was a director. So two things, if we have a moment or two to share. One is I was the summit director of a virtual conference called Boys to Men, not the rock band, but Boys to Men USA, which was about conscious masculinity. You can go to BTM Summit. I think it was 2020.org. It was right at the turning point. And it was a culmination of probably several years of men's work that I've been participating in, um, of just what are the social pressures, cultural pressures, and all these different things that are experienced by guys of all ages and all cultures. And so directing that summit from like ideation to the speakers to like all of that, and we had about good almost 200 attendees on that 4-day summit, and even George Foreman, the girl. I mean, he's known as a girl guy, George Foreman, but he's a former two-time heavyweight boxing champion. He was our keynote speaker, and to be able to get to kind of have folks like that to talk about their journey was pretty awesome. And so that was really awesome. And then adding to that, the other cool win was a friend of mine, and these are maybe a kind of flavors of some of the educational marketing projects I've worked on, came to me and asked me, hey, I want to make a card game. He runs a nonprofit here in Oakland. And he's like, I want to make a card game where there's no winners and losers. Everybody has to work together to win the game. So, long story short, I know we're at the end of our wrapping up of the podcast episode, but we ended up creating an Indiegogo campaign. Ended up creating such a card game that got distributed to about 400 to 600 student teachers and schools in the local Oakland and San Francisco area. It was also featured in, I think, NBC, CNBC.
Oh, that's awesome.
Um, so yeah, that was a really amazing accomplishment to work on a cool, innovative project like.
Congratulations! Wow, that's
Yeah,
huge.
congratulations. That is amazing. I feel like you should also advertise that more, right? Like put it into your coaching programs and all that, just like as a maybe on your website or something. Just be, I think, a cool thing for your clients to know.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so before we wrap part, do you have any recommendations for our listeners? And again, for recommendation, for instance, could be a book or a podcast or a movie, TV series, anything that you saw recently that stuck with you or inspired you in some way.
Let's see, recommendations. Um,
One is fine. Anyone.
yeah, I think the main thing is to invest in yourself. Like, I think that's the biggest caveat. So whether it is, and invest in the learning. So it's like whether it's the podcast that one wants to launch, go be part of 3 other people's podcasts, or find the 3 or 10 examples of the types of flavors of people who are creating such podcasts and how they're doing it, and to
Mm-hmm.
see if that resonates with your own style. Um, and also, I think coupled with that is just spending some time in silence, like spending some really good period of time in silence. So I actually have this kind of cheeky uh, acronym for spectacular.
Oh.
And so I always think like people really, we all want to be spectacular. Right? So what does it mean to be spectacular? So one is S for sensing, taking the time to like, what am I sensing? We have 5 senses. We are not the 5 senses. So this kind of idea around sensing. Second, process, right, for the P. Third is cultivating empathy cultivation. And from there moves on to compassion. I feel like compassion is an extension of empathy, but not everybody needs someone to come in and like save them from their problem. Sometimes you just need someone to kind of hold your hand while you're explaining and sharing and feeling through whatever it is you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
And then A is apply your genius. Back at T, tasks, right? Because you have like empathy, then compassion. Then what am I going to do? How am I going to help? So the organization of tasks. Then applying your genius. And create what comes. Create. Right? Next is utilize your existing resources. We all have existing resources, whether in our friends, family, what have you. But to be in a safe space where we can take inventory of that, be very focused of its value, their value, what requests, what are we willing to give them, those things. Next, learn from others. And then the A and the R is augment your reality. So I feel like, whenever we are all creators, we're reality augmenters, right? As someone who
Mm-hmm.
wants to really create or bring forth a vision that might just be living in one's own sense of hope and dreams. So anyway, that's my little cheeky acronym on being spectacular.
Great.
That's amazing.
Thank you for sharing that. So if you guys are not already connected to Parth or are interested in his program, please be sure to give him a follow on Instagram. His handle is at Coherence Coaching. That's at COHERENCE.coaching, COACHING. So be sure to give him a follow. I believe your website as well was coherence.coaching.space. Is that correct?
Yes, close. Coherence coaching, all one word, .space.
Got it. Yep. So be sure to check out his website as well. He also has a free, I believe it's an audio course. Is that correct?
Correct. It's an audio training, free audio
Yep.
training you can sign up for.
Yep. So if you guys are interested to learn more about, his coaching style as well as some proven techniques to basically take your life in general and all aspects to the next level, be sure to check out his free audio recording. I think you guys will really, really enjoy it. And then finally, if you guys are not already connected with the Your Life Unfiltered podcast on Spotify or Instagram, please be sure to give us a follow. We would also appreciate a review on Spotify. So if you guys can leave a review, if you believe this episode provided value to you, that would be much appreciated. And on Instagram, you can give us a follow at Your Life Unfiltered. And I believe that is all. Parth, do you have any last minute comments, feedbacks, or other questions for us before we wrap up this call?
No, not at all. Thank you for, sorry, I'm like looking at the dog over here as well. Thank you for the opportunity to be on this podcast. And thank you for your initiative on creating a space where people can share about their lives unfiltered.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day. Take care, everyone.